We're going to get rolling here, folks. I'd like to a couple of beginning announcements. We do typically record these meetings. I see that Catalin hit the record button. So so you're aware, none of the participants show up on the screen. We really just like to record these and then archive this on our YouTube. So you can go back and look at previous classes. So this will be recorded for your benefit, really, so you can go back and look at this material. Okay, and then those of you who maybe just joined, if you could use the chat box to let us know where you are joining from and how you heard about the event. Those two things really just really help us understand our reach. They help us understand the efficiency of our marketing and letting people know what we're doing. So if you could put in the chat box where you're joining us from and how you heard about the event. All right, very good. I'm going to switch back to my presentation screen. I hope I'm sharing there. Let's see, and we'll start the presentation mode. Well, very good. My name is Sammy Castonguay. I'm the program director here at Friends of the Owyhee. And I say here because in my mind, I am here with Friends of the Owyhee in Ontario. But tonight, I'm joining you from Sun River Resort in Central Oregon. I happen to be here for a conference. It's called the Governor's Conference on Tourism. And I was an invited panelist today for a breakout session on this specific topic, on stargazing and how implemental Oregon is. And we have this wonderful, vast dark sky area that we are working on getting designated as a dark sky sanctuary through the International Dark Sky Association. So a little bit more on that later, but I wanted to recognize why I'm tuning in from some fancy looking place here, and that's why. Yes, with Friends of the Owyhee, we do all kinds of programming. So maybe you heard about this on Facebook through an astronomy club. Maybe you heard about it through Humanitrix, following us, or stargazing. But please, if you haven't visited our website, friendsoftheowyhee.org, or our Facebook page, then please do. And please become or a friend or support. Whether you live in our local area, in the Four Rivers area, the Treasure Valley, Oregon, Idaho, the greater United States, or the world, we like to think that as conservation advocates, we're working here in the Owyhee, but we have a global network of conservationists and folks that support us. So please, if you have any questions about what we're doing or when to visit us or anything about the Owyhee, then please visit the website and get a hold of us. We always love to hear interesting questions. I'm also by background a geologist from University of Oregon, where I studied rocks. So what am I doing here talking about the night sky? Well, over years of being out during the summer and camping, oftentimes with students or research groups, and the beautiful, and mostly in Central Oregon or even in Death Valley, California, the night sky always overhead is always such a wonderful thing at night to sit under and enjoy each other's company. And year after year, we would go, does anybody know anything about the night sky or about the stars? And everybody would kind of look and go, well, there's the Big Dipper. So I did take it upon myself at some point to learn a lot more about the night sky. I also took a planetary geology class. So I learned to look at our local solar system through a geologic lens. I mean, after all, those are all just rocks out there too, just like our planet. And then luckily enough, when I came here to Treasure Valley Community College in Ontario, I had the opportunity to also teach astronomy as my predecessor had been doing, which is really, really quite fun. So I'll say another few things about the style of the class in just a moment. I teach that in the winter, and this week is finals week. So the students are taking their final, and they just had their stargazing practicum last week, and they all aced it. It was great. I'd also like to mention that we do this in collaboration with community libraries. So a few of those listed below: the Ontario Community Library, the Vale Library, where we have not been in person yet, but hopefully that's coming. The Harney County Library, where we've also not been in person, and the McDermitt Library down in Nevada. Very northern Nevada, touches the Oregon border, where we have been able to do a star party. So thank you to all of those, the libraries that also promote the material and are giving access to their community, or to stargazing in their community. I'd also like to acknowledge that the area that that we as Friends of the Owyhee like to think about as stewards, that we are stewarding. This is also the ancestral territory of the Northern Paiute and Western Shoshone people that were forcibly removed from their homes during Euro-American colonial colonization of Western North America. And so the least we can do is acknowledge their presence, the people around us today. And I like to talk about the stars as a cultural resource. And of course, here, the Northern Paiute have an abundance of stories around the night sky also. All right, so what we're going to go over tonight, a few things about just an introduction to stargazing in case you're brand new to this subject. And if that's you, right, you're like, oh, I want to learn more about stargazing, do go back to our archive and look at some of those presentations. I always go over this kind of beginning information every time, but the earlier material from last year, I cover that a lot more. So some gear, some setting your awareness and setting process. And then I'd like to kind of take a tangent into the importance of natural night skies. So if you're a beginning stargazer, advanced stargazer, then it's already clear you're in the door of seeing the importance of looking up and seeing the night sky. But I want to say a little bit more about what we can do as advocates of a dark night sky. Then lastly, the last 20 minutes of tonight, I didn't change the very intro slide. We're going to talk about circumpolar constellations, not the winter circle. We did that last January, excuse me. Okay, so here's the beginning slides you'll see in the archive, but some gear for stargazing. Dress appropriately. If you're going to do this in the winter months like we have been during the astronomy class at TVCC, dress warm. I can't tell you how much of an impact that makes on your experience and decreases the fun of the experience if your hands start to get cold after 5 minutes. So dress appropriately, get something warm to drink. Then it really helps to have some kind of background information, whether it's this lecture, whether it's your star wheel, your Edmund star wheel analog, or I would highly recommend the program Stellarium. There's a desktop app that is really wonderful, really fun to play with. I'll use a lot of images from that tonight. And then also we all have a space phone, and there's wonderful apps available on the space phone. Again, I would recommend Stellarium. I did just learn that it's about $15 on the app, which I wasn't aware of. I think it was $2 when I bought it. So there's other free ones that are out there, but I highly recommend it. Now, what I tell my class, and I'd like to tell you as students of stargazing, don't depend on just using the app. Okay, make a plan. This is part of that setting awareness and process now, is knowing where north is at, what season you're in, what the phase of the moon is like, and then making a plan. I'm going to go out and I'm going to look at these features that I just learned. And then you look around, you try to find them. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And then you get out the app and you use the app to supplement what you already had in your head. Okay. Then also, as far as setting your awareness, your hands, actually, if you outstretch your hand at arm's length away, so that's stretching out your arm, because of our anatomy, our hands and this distance and our eyes, it all makes about the same angles because of our human anatomy being all basically the same. So if you hold your hand out, then your fist is about 10 degrees wide, okay? And then if you outstretch your pinky and your finger, this is about 18 degrees. Or if you really stretch them out there and kind of a hang loose sign, this is maybe gets to 20 degrees, okay? So just having some kind of general awareness of how to measure the night sky, okay? We'll use that as we're navigating around. I say navigating because the night sky is kind of like a map, all right? If you imagine a map of your state, you imagine where the capital is at, you imagine where some of the major roads and highways and interstates are at. Those roads are like the lines that are connecting the dots of the cities, and those dots are kind of like the stars. So navigating, just like, say, go south from Portland to get to Eugene, we're actually going to use, instead of the spatial awareness, we're going to use degrees and directions to help communicate, I should say, where stars and constellations are at. All right. And then as far as additional resources, there's all sorts of wonderful stargazing books that are out there, right? This is the one that I like to recommend. This is what I began kind of learning on. One of the later books that I got and wish I would have got it right away. This is called A Walk Through the Heavens. So this helps navigate, just as I described, kind of like a map, okay? So yeah, setting some awareness and process is very important. I would highly recommend learning one thing at a time before you move on. All right. So
hey, Sammy.
Yeah.
Sammy, really quick, your display isn't advancing at all.
Oh, okay. Let's
There we
see.
go. Now I see it advancing.
Okay, let me try this again. How's that?
Are you advancing at all?
Yep.
Oh, no, it's not working.
No. Okay. So glad that you said that. So I'm going to leave it off of presenter mode then, so you can see this. You can see slides.
Yes. Now I can see. Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't even realize you weren't advancing. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah. That's when I think I heard a ding a little while ago, and that was probably somebody in the chat saying that, and having them separate, I just can't see it. So thanks a lot for letting me know. Okay. Well, the importance of natural night skies, I wanted to hit a couple of points here. I'll kind of hit those one by one, ideally, but let's start out with I probably don't need to convince you on this, but I just want to make this convincing argument that no matter where you are in the world, no matter what your maybe family lineage or your ethnicity, your spiritual beliefs, all of us here, humans on this planet, for really close generations, maybe just a couple of generations ago, like your grandparents, but certainly for thousands of years, we can see the evidence of people, humans, just like you and I, our ancestors, have been looking at the night sky and celebrating the night sky as an important cultural feature for thousands of years. So this is just a couple of examples of this. I pulled a couple of movie references here. So I like in Lion King, where Timon and Pumbaa and Simba are looking up at the night sky, and Timon is like, oh, I think that those are fireflies that got stuck in that big bluish black thing up there. Okay. And then Pumbaa, who probably says the most accurate thing is he says, I think that those are burning balls of gas millions of miles away, which is of course correct. And then Simba brings in that kind of more cultural response to the stars. And I think he talks about the ancestors. He talks about the kings of the past being up there and the sky looking down on us, which you'll see in a lot of cultural reverence stories, right? So no matter the interaction of those different three, each one of those characters are having a deep relationship of wonder and awe about the night sky. So I refer to this in my class as the caveman perspective, not derogatorily at all of any people who've ever lived off of the land in a hunter or gatherer kind of way, but really to reference the movie The Croods, honestly. So, and if you're familiar with that movie, it's kind of a bunch of Neanderthals, and then this Homo sapien comes along, and the Neanderthals are afraid of the dark. And the Homo sapien ends up convincing them to go up to the high canopy and to look at the sky above. And they're all just in awe. So I still feel like that when I walk out, and whether it's going to stargaze or whether it's I'm driving at night and I stop, I look up in awe. It's an impressive feature that we have of the natural night sky. Okay, then on the right-hand side of the slide is just kind of a whole smattering of different cultural phenomena that I bring into the first lecture of the class to kind of make this argument. So there's Stonehenge, there's the pyramids of Giza that are well known to be aligned to major constellations. Of course, Stonehenge being aligned towards solstices and equinoxes. You have the Al-Tazir bee shaman, that the tapestry that character is wearing is interpreted as being emblematic of the night sky and how important the night sky was to these people. Teotihuacan outside of Mexico City with the Pyramid of the Moon and the Pyramid of the Sun, also well known to be taking the night sky and placing that on Earth. And of course, the lower right hand there, you have the Greco-Roman traditions, which astronomy today, the study of astronomy, has 88 constellations that the night sky is built out of. And those names of those constellations, the shapes and their space, are all derived from the Greco-Roman traditions. But I also like to acknowledge that there are living traditions today, like the Lakota star knowledge and the Paiute, the Northern Paiute stories here today, that are slightly different than those in the scientific world or that are from Greco-Roman times. So just like to acknowledge the plethora of cultural resources or cultural perspectives that suggests the night sky is something that we all enjoy from all walks of life. Okay, so that being a little bit of background there, what about light pollution? Why, if it's such an important cultural feature, then why don't we have it everywhere? And well, bright night lights, for better or for worse, we light up our cities. We light up, of course, our home to do our work at night. We light up dark alleyways to make sure there's no funny business going on. And we've tended to err on the side of everything needs to be brighter. Brighter is better. And studies have actually shown that criminals can't actually work in darkness, right, in pitch darkness. So the old adage that maybe if we light everything up, then there'll be less crime has actually been demonstrated to be untrue. So light pollution is the phenomena of light that is not shielded and aimed to the ground, of scattering off of the particles in the atmosphere and illuminating much more of the atmosphere than is necessary. So again, when we're using a light, say you're using a flashlight, you're looking at something specific over here, and that's directed and aimed light. So what are some of the solutions to light pollution? And I should mention here the New World Atlas of Artificial Sky Brightness. Please do visit that website, and you can look all over the world to see just how either light polluted some areas are, like say in Europe, or look at how dark some areas are, like here in southeastern Oregon. It's wonderful. Okay, and here's a compilation of that map, and all of these bright spots over here, all these colors. If you look at the key that's given there, this is actually the unit is the candela, a standard unit of luminous intensity or brightness of a light in a specific direction. Now, this is computer simulated data. This is a model taking point sources and casting that into not counting for topography, casting that to show what areas will have high light pollution or brightness, high candelas. So in this map, you can probably already start to identify maybe where you live, the cities that are near you, because the cities show up as nice big bright spots. But you can really make out the kind of like the Mississippi line there, right in the middle of the Midwest, where we have the east and all the way to the eastern seaboard that is very lit up, and then we have the west of all of the open rangeland and public lands and all of these sorts of things. So you can start to identify some of those big dark areas. And that's what we are talking about here with the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Network, is this really large area in southeastern Oregon. So some of the solutions for light pollution, one of the most obvious is just reducing the amount of light that's cast up into space. So an unshielded light, a capped light might be phase one, a partially shielded, or a fully shielded light that actually directs the light to where it's needed, depending on the use that's out there, okay? So lighting that makes sense. And then another aspect of this is you can have lights that are on timers. You can have lights that have motion detectors. So they're actually being used when they're needed and not just casting light for no reason, okay? And then another way that we can begin to kind of cap off light pollution and let it be as bad as it's going to get today, if we sort of put limits on it right now. And sort of what do those limits look like then? So that might be defining a dark sky preserve, or an area in which, like say a park, a state park, a national park, that says we are designating this as a dark sky area, so we respect the night sky. We are not going to install lights that are going to cast more light pollution. And that's a way to limit the effect of light pollution getting any worse. Of course, maybe we can also take where it's at now and we can decrease some of the light pollution in some of our rural areas too. Like some small towns, maybe municipalities can take it upon themselves, or urban centers, to say, look, we want to make a municipal law, an ordinance that says we want to retrofit all of our street lights with these more dark sky friendly lights. So that's another way to do it. Why would we do all these things? Of course, preservation of a shared multicultural resource, as I argued before, but also what I'm doing here in Sun River, Oregon today is we're talking about astrophotography and tourism. There are areas, vast areas of Europe where they don't get to, so this is on a Bortle system, they call it, and Bortle 1 is incredibly dark and Bortle 3 is still pretty darn dark. I mean, there's areas in Europe that don't get below a Bortle 4. So people do want to come see some of the darkest of the night skies where they can actually see the Milky Way. So there's potential for people to come to areas just to come see these, how dark these areas are. So there's a little bit of tourism that's there. And, it's great if somebody's coming to hike a canyon in the area, but, small towns need revenue that's based on overnight lodging and meals, perhaps. So if you're doing a nighttime activity, that ensures that people coming in might want to stay in your town and eat in your town. So that's one of the arguments in the benefit for tourism. Yes, we are the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Network. Then we joined the official steering committee about 6 or 9 months ago, and we are very well through the proposal to have a dark sky sanctuary here in southeastern Oregon. So by southeastern Oregon, I mean the 3 counties that you can see in Oregon on that map: Malheur County, which is where Friends of the Owyhee is based, Harney County, and Lake County. Those are the 3 darkest counties, and the boundaries sort of weave around the edges of those counties to have this Oregon sanctuary as not just the largest in the United States, but quite possibly the largest in the world. So right now, Death Valley National Park, if you can think of the size of Death Valley National Park, is about the size of Lake County, Oregon. So when this sanctuary is accepted by the International Dark Sky Association, it'll be 3 times bigger than the largest dark sky sanctuary that exists on planet Earth right now. So we're really excited about this. And this was today. One of the other presenters just emailed this to me. So this was the 4 folks on the panel. And Bob Hackett from Travel Southern Oregon is on the far right side here. He was going to do this, but he actually made a Lorax helmet. But it's not Lorax. I think he calls them Astrax. So instead of speaking for the trees, I really like this. We're here to speak for the stars, to speak for the night sky. And I thought that was very eloquently done, how he did that. And then we have Dawn Nielsen in the red shirt, and she's mostly steering a lot of the paperwork. We happen to be doing a lot of the educational outreach and some of the lighting inventory. And then Alana from Travel Eastern Oregon over on the left is some of our core team. So how can you get involved in this effort? If you live in any 3 of these counties, we can get you involved. We need your help. So one of these is determining exactly how dark this area is. So as I mentioned, these are computer models. So we need to go out and actually measure how dark the night sky is with a device called a sky quality meter. So we have one of these at Treasure Valley Community College. We have one of these with Friends of the Owyhee. And we have 2 of these available in our community library. So Ontario Community Library has a kit. And then we're working on getting these kits elsewhere as well. Oh, and Harney County Library also has a couple of these kits there in Burns Hines. So there's a way for you to get directly involved in this effort. If you would like to, please contact us. And we can get you set up with a sky quality meter, a road to go drive, and some data to collect. Okay, so here's an example of what these kits look like. If you would rather just go directly to your library, they have the maps and the resources and the constellation guides and a red light and a sky quality meter included there. So go feel free to check one of these out. Or if you happen to be a library or a museum or another public entity in the area that would like to have one of these kits, then talk to us and maybe we can get you one of these kits in your hands for your area. Another way to be involved in this effort is to use the globe at night coming up on the March 23rd to April 1st period, where you can use your space phone and the number of stars that you can see in a certain constellation as a proxy for the darkness. And this is really crucial data for the much larger global project, but we are using locally the global project data for the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Network. Okay, so I would suggest before that period opens that you go ahead and fiddle with your space phone a little bit. Again, that's globeatnight.org. Highly suggest it. Okay, well, we're about to the meat of tonight to get on to the stargazing activity, which is the 5 circumpolar constellations, or sometimes called circumboreal constellations. And for all of the past recorded stargazing presentations, you can, we'll send out this PDF after tonight's class, but also just go to the Friends of the Owyhee YouTube page and you'll see the archive there. This year, we're splitting up every other month. We're doing a stargazing activity, so January and March. But then on the even months, we are hosting a specialist to come talk about another Owyhee subject, an Owyhee naturalist subject. So last month we had Scott Torland from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife talk about bighorn sheep. Wonderful presentation. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get it recorded. And there were some problems with the internet connection as well. But that was a really important conversation, a really important presentation. We hope to bring that again in some way, or to get a recording from Scott so we can get you that valuable information about the bighorn sheep populations. Okay, to kind of summarize a little bit, there's somewhere around a 70 to 80% decline in the population in a couple of years because of a domestic sheep disease that's been communicated to the natural native bighorns. Okay, it's very sad. And then next month, we're going to be hosting Susan Fritz from the Vale District Bureau of Land Management to talk about native seed collection. Okay, so look for advertisements on that. Actually, you can go ahead and register now on the Humanitrix website. And then in March, I'll be back to talk about the 5 visible planets that you can see with your naked eye. Actually, Mercury, you might need a pair of binoculars. You can still see it if you know where you're looking. The Greeks and us today, we can't see Uranus. We can't see Neptune. We can't see Pluto. With your naked eye, you have to have a telescope to see those. So there's actually 5 visible planets that we can see in the sky in early June. So that presentation is going to be in preparation for you to go outside around June 10th and to look at all 5 planets in the same night sky. Pretty stoked about that. Okay, and then a couple of other topics here through the year that we'll move through. Okay. The circumpolar constellations. So again, as I mentioned, first, let's set up your spatial awareness. Last month, we looked to the south, or well, in January, we looked to the south. So this month, I want you to pivot around and look to the north. I'm doing this in my real space here, and you can do that at home too. Try to figure out which direction is north. If your rocks and magnets in your head aren't working quite right, then use the space phone, okay? Typey, there's a native compass app that's in there. And just go ahead and start getting your spatial awareness with where you're sitting today. Because chances are where you're gonna go stargazing either tonight or the next time you have that opportunity, your spatial awareness of where you live is also going to bleed into where you go. So start setting that spatial awareness, and then when you drive to work tomorrow morning or whatever it is that you do, try to keep that spatial awareness so you know generally which direction north is. Of course, the space phone's always going to help, but find north. As we find north, this exercise can be done through any season. Now, all the slides I'm going to show you are for the spring season, okay? And I'll make that clear as we go over the constellations, why that matters. And then also noticing what time the sun sets in your area. I'm at 45-ish degrees latitude, and the sun sets now thanks to standard time at 8 o'clock at night. So we have quite a while now to wait until stargazing time, where of course during the winter it gets dark really early and we can go out stargazing at say 5:30. So knowing when the sun goes down and when it's possible to go out stargazing. Because the sun now is on a low angle on the horizon, it might technically set at 8 o'clock, but really the sunsets are really long during the summer months as the sun is low on the horizon. So I'm going to recommend going out at about 8:30 is where I have all of the slides set to. Okay, tonight we also have a 98% waxing moon. It's a full moon tomorrow night or Friday night. So it's very bright, just good to take note of. I actually like that. I like to see the big bright light of the moon at the same time I'm stargazing because the stars and constellations that I typically am looking at, they are some of the brightest stars of the night sky and in those constellations, where if it's too dark, then all of the other stars start to overlap with some of the ones, or they start to bleed out some of the other really important stars, say of Big Dipper. So I actually like when the moon is out. It doesn't affect my stargazing at all. And then again, let's remind ourselves of our hand distance. It's about 10 degrees. So the method here, the process, you're going to find the Big Dipper looking out here to the north. So that could be an exercise in itself, okay? And then the technique here, and it's just here in words, is you're going to align the two stars at the end of the cup. go in a straight line about one open hand and a fist, or you could go 3 fists. It's about 30 degrees, okay, to a star of equal brightness, and that's Polaris, the North Star, and also the tail of the Little Dipper, okay? So that's just the words there. Let's go ahead for reference later. Let's go ahead and go through these. Because I'm not in presentation mode, my slides aren't gonna do the, what do you call it? Do the transition or the appear. So bear with me here with a lot of the overlapping pictures. But so here we are at 8:30 at night and out of Ontario, Oregon. We're looking to the north. The cardinal directions are actually labeled down there at the bottom, northwest, north, and northeast. It's curved because the program Stellarium, again, it's a 2-dimensional screen looking at a 3-dimensional degree of space. So the more that you zoom out, there's a curvature to the landscape to preserve some spatial awareness between the stars, okay? So anyhow, we're looking for the Big Dipper, and I have a picture of a dipper there. In case you didn't know really what a dipper looks like. A dipper or a ladle, which are kind of different things, but the Big Dipper appears more like a ladle than it does a dipper. But anyhow, the shape or the position of the dipper tonight as you go out, it will be to the east of north, and it'll be oriented kind of up and down. Okay, where the tail will be pointed towards the horizon. Okay, so there in the yellow circle, you can start to make out the shape, hopefully, of the Big Dipper. Now, I've labeled quite a few things here, and these are supposed to pop up one at a time, but there's 7 stars of the Big Dipper. So count them up right there. And then by convention, we take star number 1, the end of the tail, and then star number 7 is the end of the cup. Excuse me, I just said tail. I should refer to it as the handle when we're talking about it as a dipper. So there's the handle portion and the cup portion. And then also notice that there's 2 sides to the cup. There's the bottom or the closed end of the cup, okay? Because, you know, if you hold it upside down, then it's not really the bottom anymore. So the closed end of the cup. And then there's also the open end of the cup, okay? Closed end, open end. So that nomenclature is important now that we begin to navigate around the night sky. So just like if you're driving from Portland to Eugene, you need to know what direction to go in relationship to Portland or to where you're at. Okay, so as mentioned, let's find the 2 stars that are at the very end of the cup. Okay, so that would be these 2 bright stars at the end of the cup, okay, or moderately bright stars. And then if we align those 2 stars and go in a straight line in the direction of the open end of the cup, then we we go about 3 fists, okay? So that's the next slide here is the reminder of about 3 fists. And we get to a star of equal brightness. And I say equal brightness in reference to star number 7. They're about the same brightness. Okay, so there we are, the 2 stars go through a straight line, and then we find this star of equal brightness. Okay. And that star is Polaris. Okay, as it says up there on the top of the slide, that star is Polaris. Now, why Polaris? This image actually comes from a YouTube video that is a time-lapse video. It's called, I should have linked this in there, but it's just stars spinning over the cabin or something like that. Polaris spinning over the cabin. And I'm sure there's a dozen other types of videos here. I just became infatuated with this one. So why Polaris? It's actually the pole star. So if you imagine, right, the Earth that is a spherical object and is kind of a globe, but remember we spin in one direction or we rotate, right? And that's what controls, if we're looking away from the sun, it's darkness. But as we spin and we look towards the sun, it's daylight. And that spin, it doesn't spin this way, okay? It actually just spins about one axis. And that axis then is what you can think about as the pole. And there's a North Pole and there's a South Pole. Well, here I'm broadcasting from the Northern Hemisphere, where you can see the circumpolar constellations, and everywhere from the equator to the North Pole, when we are looking out at the night sky, even if you're down here at the equator, or if you're up here at 45 degrees, you're looking up at the night sky with the North Star right above the pole or the axis of the planet. So it's not right on there, but it's, if you project this pole up into space, then Polaris appears to line up with that pole. Okay, so it's located above the North Pole. Because of our rotation, it stays still from our perspective, which is really cool. Okay, and that's what gives rise to this image here. So that a time-lapse image of all of the stars moving around the North Star, and then right there in the middle of that big circle, you can see one star that's still. It just makes one point. And that's what's known, of course, as the North Star. The reason, well, it's the North Star because if you take where the position of that star is at and you drop it down to the landscape, that marks north. It's not the North Star because it's the brightest in the sky. It's not the North Star because it actually falls on the horizon. And it's not the North Star because it's up. Okay, sometimes I get that. If you ask a bunch of kids, point to north, sometimes you get pointing up. And that's called the zenith. Okay, so the North Star is obviously a really important star for stargazing and for navigation. So there we are with the Big Dipper. Okay, but I want to now remind you that the Big Dipper is not actually a constellation. You thought you knew a constellation, right? Or it's actually an asterism, which is a small segment of a much larger constellation. So there you can see in the circle, you can see Big Dipper makes up about half of that space. And then the other half of that space is the full constellation Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. Okay, I did a little bit of drawing here with my mouse pad skills. And again, I wanted these to show one at a time, but you have the shape of the bear here. And so bears don't have big, long tails today, but you know, at one time, the cave bear, they did have long tails. And this constellation has been identified for thousands of years through many cultures as a bear, which I think is pretty interesting, a bear with a tail. So there's the tail, then you have kind of the back end of the bear, you have the belly of the bear that makes up the cup. And then if you project from the end of the cup out, you get to a point, which I think about as the bear's nose. Okay, and then there's a couple of stars that make up the bear's ears as well. Now, the legs, if you go from the front midsection of the bear and down, they kind of make an angle, just like the elbows of an animal would. And then they come out to kind of a fork, which represent the paws. Okay. And then the back legs that are there, they do the same thing. They go down, they jog forward, and then they make kind of a set of paws. All right, so if you needed a better visual for that than my crayon style drawing, here is the picture that Stellarium has. I do like this picture, and they also include a back leg that, that goes down in this direction too, okay, as part of the constellation space Ursa Major. All right, well, what about the Little Dipper then? Okay, so here's, again, our picture of a dipper, and the star Polaris actually makes up the very end of the tail for Little Dipper. So do you remember how to find Polaris? Go ahead and find that on the screen, right? You have the Big Dipper, you line the two stars, you go about 3/5 over in a straight line, and you find a star of equal brightness. So that star right there, Polaris, and you can start to make out the shape of the Little Dipper. So let me put my crayon line drawing on there to show you the Dipper. And again, Polaris making up the end of the tail. Now, since we need a nice little cute reference of that bear, I'll go ahead and use Stellarium's picture that shows Polaris down there and the shoulder stars in front. Now, a lot of times the stars of the back end of the little bear are very difficult to see. So this is where doing a little bit of indoor study, getting used to what you probably should see, or using your Stellarium inside before you go out stargazing. Because if you're depending on seeing the exact shape of a dipper, but yet a few of the stars, especially like 8:30 at night when it's still twilight, are too dim for you to see, you might start confusing yourself. Oh, I don't see a dipper. Oh, that's probably not the little dipper. Oh, I'm all confused. So with stargazing, knowing the pattern recognition of the shapes as you get started is really crucial. Okay, moving on, I moved the time now to 9 o'clock. So we have the stars have moved a little bit around Polaris, just a half an hour's worth. And I wanted to then again reference the Big Dipper. And if you go on that straight line all the way to Polaris, but this time if you go beyond Polaris, again, it's about 3/5. Then look for the shape that makes the Greek letter sigma. Okay, or you could just think about it as an E, or kind of a jagged E. Okay, that shape though, of course, as the night sky spins around Polaris, that epsilon later in the night, you'll see it down on the horizon over the north as a W, or in the morning tomorrow, when you wake up, you'll see it way over east of north, making a 3. And then, of course, let's see, as we get a little bit later in the year and Cassiopeia is a little bit higher, you can see it as an M. So don't always expect to see the epsilon. It can be an E, a 3, an M, or a W. Okay. So there we have found Cassiopeia, makes that classic M, W, or sigma shape. And Cassiopeia in the Greco-Roman tradition is thought of as a queen, and she's kind of sitting on her throne in a profile view, or kind of a side view, right? If I'm sitting here in my chair, to the side, my head goes down, out to my legs, and then down. So this is really important for the next step, to think about Cassiopeia that way, with the bottom bench being her feet, and that brightest star at the very bottom being the star Calf. Because to find the her counterpart, the king, Cepheus, it really helps to know the orientation of that interpretation of Cassiopeia. Now, if you prefer not to think about the stars anthropomorphically or human-like, and you just want to see it as a W or as an M, I want you to notice that one side in this view, it's the top side, one side of the W is kind of skewed, right? So if both sides of the W are symmetrical, but in Cassiopeia, we have one side of the W that's got kind of a bent limb over here, okay? So to find Calf, it's not the bent limb sign, but it's the straight limb side. And if we go below Cassiopeia's feet and look for kind of the shape of a house, again, this is like a crayon drawing, kind of a shape of a house, right? Just a preschool drawing. There's a square and there's a triangle on the top to make the tip of a house. Okay, and that is Cepheus, the king. And now Cepheus, he's looking at you straight on in his throne, where his hands are up here. So perhaps his knees and his hands make a square, and then the top of his head, or the crown, makes a triangle. Okay, so that's one way to look at it, that he's looking at you face on. And in this image, I like Legos. I play a lot of Legos with my kiddos. And I thought that this image did that pretty well, where it shows the square base, the square Lego base, and then the kind of pointy top up to the crown. Okay, and so that is King Cepheus in a front-facing view. So let's recap just a little bit there. We've gone over 4 circumboreal constellations. A couple of these you may have already known, right? You have Ursa Major, the asterism Big Dipper. Then you have the Little Dipper with the tail star Polaris. You have Cassiopeia, the queen, and Cepheus, the king. Now, the 5th constellation, the 5th circumboreal constellation, is called Draco, the dragon. And the reason I'm going over these 5 tonight and why they're called circumboreal constellations, or circumpolar, excuse me. The pole star, Polaris, all of the stars spin around. Now, these 5 never set below the horizon. That's what's so cool about them. At 45 degrees latitude, I think all the way down to about 35, that these 5 constellations are visible all year round. So in astronomy, we oftentimes talk about what's a winter constellation, what's a summer constellation, what's a spring constellation. And that nomenclature refers to everything that comes up in the east and goes through the southern sky and then goes down to the west. Those would be things like your zodiac constellations. Like right now, Orion and Gemini and Leo is coming up. Those things are all southern sky constellations that you can see during the winter. And then pretty soon we'll start referring to the set of spring constellations. But these ones, as you look to the north, these are here all year round. So you can go out every night through the year and say hello to these friends. Okay, these 5. All right, so let's go find Draco then. Draco is fun. It's a little bit difficult. I set the clock again back another or forward another half an hour to allow Draco's eyes and his head to rise above the horizon a little bit. So let's go back to the cup of the Dipper. And if you go from those pointer stars in a straight line to Polaris, notice I keep saying straight line. It's pretty darn straight. But if you happen to, and this is a really common problem, if you're looking for the stars and you don't go in a straight line, some people will glance off down here to these. Okay, so Polaris is a star of equal brightness that's 30 degrees away from star 7. But then on the way, you pass these other faint stars. Okay, so those other faint stars are actually part of the constellation Draco. Okay, it's in this whole constellation space down here. And here's how I drew it on Stellarium tonight. Now, I think that I have a curve in here that's a little bit messed up. But what's important to recognize is the tail is what you pass as you go between Big Dipper and Polaris. And then he makes these big curves. And I like to think about him as he's protecting the little bear, you know, kind of curving around it. And then lower down towards the horizon, in this case, you have kind of a squarish, it looks more like a circle in my image, more of a squarish head. And at the very bottom of that head, you have 2 bright eyes, or 2 bright stars that make up Draco's eyes. So here's Stellarium's view of that. Again, we have the tail over here, curves around, and then we get to the eyes of Draco. Okay, and that would be the 5th circumboreal constellation. So welcome to the club of knowing not just the winter circle, which is going down now, so we can shift our attention to the north and say hello to the circumboreal constellations, or circumpolar constellations. So to recap, went over a little bit of gear, awareness, and processes to make you have an enjoyable stargazing experience. I wanted to communicate the importance of natural night skies and natural night sky advocacy, go over the circumboreal or circumpolar constellations. And we're going to do this again, May 18th. We'll go over the 5 visible planets. And maybe you've already been putting some questions in the comments. I'll look down there in just a second. Again, I wanted to reference next month's webinar with Susan Fritz on native Forbes seed collection. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so I can see the Google. There we go. All right. Hello. Looks like we had a couple people join us since I was last on. Lindell, thank you very much. Lindell says, that was neat. Thank you. Yeah, you're very welcome. I think it's all pretty neat too. Really enjoy it. Okay. Let's see then. Casey Brown says, you mentioned earlier we get the constellation names from the Greco-Roman culture. Does that include the constellations of the southern hemisphere? I don't think so. I'm not positive, Senora Brown, having not done much to do with astronomy in the southern sky. I don't think so. I think that because in the Greco-Roman culture, they only had names for those things in the north. There wasn't names for those things in the south that at least came from Greco-Roman culture. So I think today in modern astronomy, those are derived from other cultures. I know that there's a couple of Polynesian named constellations that are in the southern hemisphere. But yeah, good question. Thank you. Let's see. Michael, it looks like he might have answered the question too. So Michael says, is there a South Star? Oh, and Claire answered, not exactly. There's a Southern Cross. That's right. There isn't, we're pretty fortuitous that we have a star that falls right on the pole. And then, yes, in the South, again, I'm not terribly familiar with constellations in the South, but there is no equal star in the South. Instead, there's the Southern Cross that using some geometry between them, you can figure out exactly where South is at. Yeah, very good. And then somebody asked about what's the one day star, and that is the sun. Yeah, thank you, Catalin, for that. And then Eartha, sorry about that. My nomenclature for a space phone is a smartphone. I just remember when these things were coming out back in the day, and I just thought they were like space age technology in our pocket, like they were directly out of Star Trek, So I just think of them as space phones. Thank you. Okay. Okay, and Claire also was asking about the book that I had referenced when my slides weren't advancing. We see only your desktop. It's not going through the slides. The book is called A Walk Through the Heavens. A Walk Through the Heavens. Okay, and we'll make sure that these are sent out. The PDF is sent out so you can peruse this. And of course, it'll be archived on YouTube. All right, so back down. Lindell, looks like Lindell left. Southern Cross is really cool too. You betcha. Yes, and thanks to the team. It does take a team of support to do stuff like this, and we're so happy today to have a team of people to do these. Well, if there's no further questions, you can either type there in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute, you could certainly ask a question. And if you're not, you can go ahead and log off, and I'll see you next time, whether it's for a stargazing presentation or our next seed collection webinar. But I'll hang out for a couple minutes if there's any other questions, okay? Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.